Tuning in for this Resource and Recovery Center webinar. I'm Mayor Miro Weinberger, and this is the third in a series of webinars that the Resource and Recovery Center has been hosting to help Burlingtonians find their way through this pandemic and get to the other side. And today's topic is a really important one. This is today where we're going to be focused on how Burlingtonians can access federal aid. The response of the federal government to this public health and economic emergency has been quite significant with respect to making relief funds available. And this is an unfolding story. There is a bill new this week that adds essentially an additional $500 billion on top of the previously appropriated $2.3 trillion. So there's an enormous amount of money that has been made available by Congress. However, it's one thing for this money to be appropriated, for these programs to be designed. In many cases, it is a totally separate discussion and separate steps and actions that need to happen for Burlingtonians to actually secure those dollars and to get those dollars for their businesses and into their bank accounts if you are a Burlingtonian who has been hit hard by this crisis. We have with us today an incredible array of local experts who will be introduced in a moment. The city's own Christine Curtis is going to moderate this effort, and Christine is part of this Resource and Recovery Center, this new structure within city government that was set up on March 23rd and has about 40 city employees now who either some full-time or part-time have had their hours redirected into getting this direct relief out to Burlingtonians through efforts like this. There's also an outstanding website that has answers to a myriad of different questions and challenges that you might be facing in this crisis. And there are also contact links if the webinars aren't enough, if the online materials don't fully address your situation. We want to hear from you. We have the ability to do one-to-one, essentially case management and support, depending on what your challenge is. So you can find out all that contact information by going to the city's website. And with that, let's turn it over to Christine and our great panel. Thank you for the opportunity to kick this off, and thank you to our experts for leading this really important discussion for Burlingtonians.
Thank you, Mayor Weinberger. Thank you for kicking off this webinar. We really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you. All right, so as the mayor said, my name is Christine Curtis. I work for Burlington's Resource Recovery Center at the moment. I am also staffed at CEDO department in the city as well. I want to jump right in because we have a full panel here with a lot of great information. I wanted to point out a couple things first for everyone who is watching. As we're going throughout this webinar and people are presenting and talking, people who are watching, please feel free to send any questions through the chat feature. We will try to answer them live. Anything we can't answer live due to time constraints, we will make sure we circle back. Also be aware at the end of the webinar, I will be posting a slide that's going to have contact information for your panelists that you're going to hear from today, as well as contact information for Burlington's Resource and Recovery Center. So if you don't have a question now, or you don't want to ask it now, or something comes up later, please use that and reach out to us. This webinar is being recorded. We will post that up on the website, so you can always go back through the slides and go over some information that you hear that might be relevant to you today. I want to jump right in and introduce you to Zachary Lees. He's the staff tax attorney with Vermont Legal Aid. So Zachary, welcome.
Hi, thanks. Good to be here. So my name is Zack Lees. I'm a staff attorney at Vermont Legal Aid. We're a nonprofit law firm that provides free legal services to low-income Vermonters on civil law issues such as public benefits, family law, disability and special education, consumer debt collection, housing, healthcare, and tax issues. I handle the caseload for our low-income taxpayer clinic. We provide information and advice and representation to taxpayers who have a tax controversy with the IRS or the Vermont Department of Tax. This could be, tax deficiency that the department or the IRS is saying that you owe, audits, and stimulus check issues is what we're focusing on today. I just want to flag real quick before we get into the substance that everybody at Legal Aid has been really hard at work updating our website. So we've got a bunch of great resources at Vermont Law Help, vtlawhelp.org. So I suggest you check that out. And we also have our intake portal there and our intake line. If you think you're having an issue, you can give us a call. We can provide some consultation and advice and even representation depending on what the issue is. So as far as stimulus checks go, at the end of March, Congress passed the CARES Act, which provides for the rapid issuance of stimulus checks. This is what the IRS is calling economic impact payments. This is the $1,200 per eligible adult plus an additional $500 per eligible child under the age of 17 living with you. These are advanced tax credits against tax year 2020. However, 2020 is not over, so the IRS has to use information that they have for tax year 2019 or 2018. And this is where some of the issues lie, because what happens is next spring, when you go to file your 2020 tax return, you'll report the amount of stimulus that you received in advance. And you receive this money in advance based on the information the IRS has from 2018 or 19. And you're going to compare that to what you should have received based on the information you're providing IRS for 2020. This is what we call reconciliation. If for whatever reason you receive more stimulus than you should have in advance, such as maybe in 2018 or 19, you had a dependent under the age of 17 living in your house and you got an extra $500 for that person. But when you go to file 2020, that person has aged out. They're now over the age of 17. You will not have to pay this money back. The second point here is that if you did not get the advanced stimulus payment that you should have received, so if you received less for whatever reason, you should get that back as a refundable credit on next year, 2020's tax return. So I want to talk about eligibility very quickly, and then some of the issues that we're already seeing because people have already started to receive their payments, and a lot of people are waiting and hopefully, waiting to see if they're going to get their stimulus and how much and what some of the issues may be for that. So basic eligibility security number. In the case of a joint tax return, both spouses must hold a valid social security number to get a stimulus check, and any qualifying child on that tax return must also have a valid social security number to get the extra $500. We can get more into that later. So valid social security number is the first eligibility requirement. The second is you can't be claimed as a dependent of another taxpayer. So this means that there's a group of dependents. These are maybe young adults who are up to age 19 or age 24 if they're students and they're living at home with their parents. If they're claimed as dependents on their parents' tax returns, they're not going to get their own stimulus check. So you can't be a dependent of another taxpayer. And then the third eligibility requirement is the income limits. Generally, it's about $75,000 for a single adult in adjusted gross income, or $150,000 in adjusted gross income for a married couple. If you're at or below those numbers, you'll get the full amount of the stimulus. If you're over, it starts to phase out and you get less up until you hit the ceiling, which is about $99,000 for a single adult or $198,000 for a married couple. If you're over those income limits in adjusted gross income, you will not receive any stimulus. So those are the three main eligibility requirements. I don't know if any of our other panelists want to weigh in on eligibility and some of the issues they're seeing there. So if not, then I can get into, a lot of people are really scared because they've heard all this information about what they may need to do or if they're going to get their stimulus check automatically. So I'll hit that pretty quickly. If you file taxes in 2018 or 2019, you will automatically receive your stimulus check. You will not have to do anything, which is good news. You will also automatically receive your stimulus check if you receive a Social Security benefit, a railroad benefit, a veteran's benefit. So this would be Social Security retirement, SSI, Social Security disability, railroad retirement benefits, and VA benefits. So you do not have to do anything. And this is because the IRS has been very hard at work working with the Social Security Administration and the VA to get their data match information from them, because these administrations don't normally share information with the IRS like this. So IRS has had to set up a computer system to get the information on file from the SSA and the VA and get that sent over to the IRS so they can determine who's eligible for this stimulus check and automatically issue these out. So if you get one of these benefits, you will automatically get your check. For some people who receive SSI, SSDI, or VA benefits, that information sharing has just recently started. So it's going to be a bit delayed, and the Get My Payment portal that a lot of people are checking to see where their stimulus is, if you're getting weird messages right now, it could be because the IRS is just still processing all this information they're getting. So I would suggest you check it once a day, and you know, they're constantly updating that about once a day, and the information is continuing to flow between these other administrations in the IRS. So it does take a bit of time, unfortunately. If you earned more than the standard filing threshold, so if you were required to file a tax return and have not, so if you don't have a return on file for 2018 or 2019 and you were required to file, you will have to file a tax return to get this stimulus check. And I believe Mike McClintock from CVOEO can talk more about some of the resources for getting a tax return done right now. So I'll flag that issue. So if you've got earned income more than about $12,200 for a single person, or about $24,400 for a joint tax return, and you don't have a tax return on file for 2018 or 2019, you will have to file a tax return to get this stimulus check. And then there's a group of people who don't receive any of the benefits that we just talked about, like a Social Security Administration benefit or a veteran's benefit, and who are not required to file a tax return. These are people who are low income generally. So if you're earning below that $12,400 threshold as a single person, you're not required to file a tax return, but the IRS doesn't have any information about you in their system. They're not getting it from the VA or the Social Security Administration, because if you're not receiving a benefit, they don't have that information. And you're also not being required to file a tax return. So if you don't have a tax return on file for 18 or 19 and you're not required to file, and you're also not receiving any of these benefits, you'll have to go on and use the IRS portal called the non-filer portal, which is a recently set up online website that you enter through irs.gov. And this allows you to pretty much register with the IRS that I'm not required to file a tax return, but here's my information, so that you can flag the IRS and let them know that you need to get this stimulus check. Unfortunately, the group of people that fall into this category are our most vulnerable low-income Vermonters. These are people whose sole source of income is reach up or general assistance benefits. Sometimes that's the state DCF benefit system. These are people who may be working but earn below the filing threshold, so they're making about $12,000 a year or less, or $24,000 if both husband and wife are working, or both partners are working. Unfortunately, the only recourse right now is to get these people online and to help them register with the IRS using the non-filer portal. And then the last thing I'll flag is that for people who receive a Social Security Administration benefit or a VA benefit, the IRS is getting information from these administrations about you. So you should get your $1,200 check automatically. However, the IRS will not have, generally, they won't have information about any qualifying dependents who live with you. So while you may get your $1,200 check, unfortunately, that extra $500 per child under the age of 17 will not be coming automatically, which is why the IRS has said you need to log into the non-filer portal and provide us with information about your household. So in order to get that extra $500 per child, people who receive a Social Security Administration benefit or a VA benefit will have to use the non-filer portal as well. to get that extra $500 per child. So that's kind of my main kind of general information piece. I don't know if anybody has anything to add there.
Yeah, thank you, Zachary. That was a lot of really great information, and I'm glad you know, we used that to kind of kick off the webinar. Really great, thank you. And I just want to remind everyone out there who is listening, please ask any questions at any point in the chat feature while we're discussing. If you have questions later, I'll provide contact information as well. So please don't be shy. I think we're going to move right along. I don't see any questions as of yet. So next up, we have Katherine Long, caseworker at the office of U.S. Senator Patrick Leahy. So welcome, Katherine. Take it away.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm, as Christine mentioned, a caseworker in Senator Leahy's office, although my office right now is my home in Richmond, Vermont. We are working remotely, which means that we're available to help Vermonters, but it may mean that you need to leave a message and we'll get back to you by phone. I have been talking to a lot of Vermonters about their stimulus payments. The IRS, as Zach mentioned, has been working very tirelessly to get these payments out, starting with the people that they already had the information on. About 60 million taxpayers have already received their payments. They were eager to send those via direct deposit for the vast majority of people, both because it's quicker and also because it then doesn't lead people to have to be outside going to the bank to deposit their checks. So there was a big focus on that, and I just wanted to touch on, build on a few of the things that Zach talked about. And I want to also just thank the City of Burlington. You all have put together a terrific website, great resources, and are really supporting the community. Legal Aid, likewise, has done a terrific job putting together resources that are available for everybody. And so I think that the piece that our office and the offices of Congressman Welch and Senator Sanders have to offer is, you know, if you can't get through, a Vermonter can't get through on the phone, doesn't have internet access, just needs some basic information, we are always happy to talk to folks. And then at some point, I anticipate we'll be dealing more with the problem resolution. You know, likewise, Legal Aid will be, you know, I'm sure helping folks when they have problems where it wasn't just an issue of timing, but there's some reason why they maybe didn't get the refund or the payment. Couple things I wanted to just mention, and one is that that we are hearing from a couple of different categories of people already, in addition to the folks who are just wondering when they're going to get their payment. One of the issues is folks that, for one reason or another, receive Social Security, VA benefits, or railroad retirement, I suppose, and also file taxes. Those folks we're noticing are having some trouble maybe getting their information online. Normally, it's not going to be a problem if they had a tax refund that went by direct deposit. Then the IRS will normally be using that. But where it seems to be a problem is if people didn't get a refund and didn't have their direct deposit with their when they filed their taxes, and then they also get VA or Social Security benefits. And it seems like, according to the IRS website and their FAQs on this, that those folks may end up getting a paper check. It may not be possible for them to enter their direct deposit information. And even though their Social Security or their VA benefits go electronically by direct deposit, they may wind up getting a paper check. That's one question that's coming up. Another question that's coming up is folks who have child support payments that are due. If they're overdue on those, that's the one area where this payment will be held. Sometimes folks worry that because they owe money to the federal government or they have some other government debt, that their tax refunds will be held, and that certainly does happen with tax refunds. With this stimulus payment, the only situation in which those are being held for those kinds of debts is with child support. and that is written into law. Where we're hearing from a few folks around that is when there's what's called an innocent spouse, someone who normally will file so that their portion of the joint return refund doesn't get held back based on their spouse's child support obligations. There seems to be maybe a systemic issue that the IRS is working on, and so that's one issue that we're hearing from a few folks about. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention is that in terms of timing, as Zach said, the IRS is working to try to get these out. It's a lot of payments. And the last group that they made an agreement with was the VA. So those may be taking a little bit longer for folks to be able to enter their information if they need to and get those payments. But VA and SSI recipients are still going to want to continue to enter their dependent information in that IRS tool if at all possible, so that they can get their $500 credit with their payment. And then finally, I have been around for a while and was here during the 2008 stimulus payments. You know, the vast majority of payments will go out to folks. There will be some little issues, and the law provides for folks to be able to reconcile that with their 2020 taxes. I think if we start to see a lot of those, that Congress and certainly Senator Leahy, I think, will be advocating that they offer some opportunities for those issues to be resolved sooner than 2020. But currently, you know, folks will be able to claim those credits on their 2020 returns, but we certainly know that it's not a great time for folks and they could really use that money. So Christine, I think we just talked about showing that website, and I think if we could just kind of maybe put a screenshot of that. That's a website that has a ton of additional information in addition to the tools. So that's really the go-to for a lot of information about this program. It breaks down into filers and non-filers, and then it's got a tremendous amount of, if you scroll down a little bit, there is a link here to this at the bottom where it says Economic Impact Payment Information Center. And that has explanations for all the things people are seeing, not all of them, but they are updating them constantly. So if folks have specific questions, that's a really great place to get information. And I think that I'll just close with saying that unfortunately, because of the coronavirus pandemic, the IRS has much more limited functions than they usually do. It's always difficult to get through to them by phone, but basically their call centers are not open. They told us yesterday that they've lost 4 employees to the virus. They've had hundreds who have been taken ill. If they open those call centers without adequate protection, we'll potentially lose a tremendously important part of our workforce, in addition to just the impact on those folks' lives. So they're trying to do their best with the resources they have given the situation, and we're certainly happy to try to assist folks in the meantime. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Catherine. I don't see any questions in the chat window, so we're just gonna keep moving right along. Next up, we have Matt Thompson, Coordinator of Programs at the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. It's a mouthful. Welcome, Matt. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I really appreciate all the information. It's very helpful for everyone. I wanted to just specifically address if anyone had questions about refugees and immigrants and recovery payments. We provide refugee resettlement services in Vermont, which includes case management and employment services, English language learning services, interpretation services, and we have a community partnership program. And we've been helping a number of clients along with the Association of Africans Living in Vermont with filing for unemployment insurance for people who've been laid off, And our clients do have a number of questions about their eligibility for various COVID-19 related relief. A lot of the barriers refugees and immigrants are facing are ones you might expect. Typically, they have lower levels of English proficiency. There's a bit less timely and translated information, or interpretation is not always available through different service providers. So for refugees, immigrants, and those who are assisting them, there's a great resource being put together at the website newamericansinvermont.com. That's a lot of information is health related, but I anticipate that there'll be more information related to recovery assistance also being put there that's translated into different languages. And another challenge is with a lot of the benefits application processes, it requires internet access and proficiency with technology. Refugees in particular tend to have lower levels of access to that, and they're less familiar with US bureaucracies in the banking system. So that presents some challenges. The next slide, please. Things that we've been running into that people with refugee and immigrant backgrounds are facing. There are scams that are targeting them in particular, where it's like a phishing attempt to try to get them to provide bank account information and social security numbers, things like that. And that's tricky because if someone has not yet filed for taxes, they just recently arrived in the United States, they're targeted, they're supposed to provide information to the IRS to be eligible for recovery payments. So if they think they're going to a site that's actually a scam, that could compromise them. But also there's a bit of confusion. Not all immigrants are eligible for the direct stimulus cash payment from the federal government. If they're not refugees or asylees or legal permanent residents and green card holders, they may not fall under the eligible categories. And then even if they do fall into those categories, if someone arrived in the last 6 months in the United States, they might not be eligible for, they might not meet the IRS residency requirements. So I've put a link here that provides a bit more information. And if there are questions, we can go to this flyer. It's kind of like a flow chart of the eligibility pathway. And then stimulus payments, if you haven't filed taxes previously, are not automatically provided. So someone who recently started working in the United States, just has been here a few months, they have to go to this non-filer form through the IRS, and the link is below here. Then another challenge is that if refugees and immigrants that are not proficient in English generally tend to file taxes online, and it's a challenge to do it they tend to do it in person. It's a challenge to do it online, and they may need help through an interpreter. I guess their ability to benefit is sometimes delayed. They may have to get a paper check, and the IRS doesn't have any previous tax information from them from a previous year. It may take longer. And then also for initial unemployment insurance claims, a lot of refugees and immigrants are having trouble filing these claims. And some of it is just English proficiency issues and maybe not understanding all the terminology. So caseworkers from USCRI Vermont and ALV have been helping dozens and dozens of people who've been laid off with this process. We're doing our best to help people that are eligible to receive unemployment benefits and the recovery checks from the federal government to file the information that needs to be filed and receive those. Okay, and then this last page here is just a review of some different resources. The NewAmericansInVermont.com website, their websites for USCRI, Vermont, and ALD, and then a few other sites with fact sheets and resources. The one I've highlighted from Refugee Council USA, that is from the Congressional Research Service, and it has a lot more detailed information about eligibility. So if anyone does have questions about eligibility for refugees and or immigrants, that's a good resource to go to. So, that was all I wanted to share at the moment, but if there are any questions now.
I don't see any questions. Thanks, Matt, especially for sharing all those really extensive resources. That's really great. And I know we kind of went through those slides quickly. I just want to remind everyone the webinar is being recorded, and we will be posting that to Burlington's Resource Recovery website, and we will post these slides as well. So all those great links that Matt shared there, you can go back and access those later. So thank you for that, Matt. Moving on, next up we have Michael McClintock, Volunteer Income Tax Assistant Site Coordinator at Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity. Welcome, Michael.
Yep, thank you, Christine. Appreciate being here. So I just wanted to touch on a couple things. So like Zach had mentioned, if you have a filing requirement, you need to file your taxes. And at VITA, we typically, on a typical year, will file or help people file like 12 to 1,300 tax returns in a year. This year we ended up getting stopped at about 750. So there's at least 500 people that we normally help that we couldn't help this year. So what we've been suggesting is that people use myfreetaxes.com, which is a free tax software. And the issue with this one is it really only does simple returns, which handles most things people run up against. You have W-2s or Social Security or normal distributions from your pensions, those types of things. It handles fine. And what we've been doing is suggesting if they run into any problems, they can call us at CVOEO and basically talk them through the whole return. The one problem we've had, if a number of people have self-employment, whether they're an Uber driver or whatever, and they like all free tax software out there is once you get out of their simple parameters, then they start charging you. So up until tomorrow, their only option is I could help them do a paper return. Otherwise, they'd have to pay. But as of yesterday, so just hot off the press, the IRS gave us a link that if people run into those situations, if they contact me, I can send them a link, and then I can walk them through pretty much any tax return they have that the free tax software would end up charging them for. That's not a link that we're allowed to publish per IRS rules because they want it to be assisted by us. So just want to make that aware if people are running into situations where the free tax software says, no, we're going to charge you, go ahead and give us a call at CVOEO and we can have a workaround for that. So just, I'm going to reiterate some of the things that Zach already covered. So first off, if you do have a filing requirement, again, we're suggesting you use the free tax software and call us for assistance, and make sure you include your direct deposit info if you want to get your stimulus payment as quick as you can. Now, if you've already filed in 2018 or 19 and you had your direct deposit included, then you don't have to do anything. But if it's not included, again, you go to irs.gov and you can use your Get My Payment tool and you can add your direct deposit information. One note on that is if you have the wrong direct deposit, say you change your bank accounts or whatever, you can't update existing direct deposit info. They say they're doing that to prevent fraud. So in that case, when they try to direct deposit, you'll get rejected, and they'll end up sending you a paper check to the latest the most current address they have on file. So on the next slide, so if you don't have a filing requirement and you don't have dependents, then again, like someone mentioned, for Social Security, SSDI, SSI, VA, the railroad benefits, no actions needed. They'll send you a $1,200 check as soon as they get around to processing them all. And that leaves Reach Up and other general assistance, even with dependents. What they need to do is, again, go to irs.gov, and they need to complete the non-filers enter payment info. That's the only way they're gonna, the IRS is gonna recognize who should be getting it and if they have dependents or not. Now, I think as Zach mentioned, if you do have dependents under 17, and if you're on SSI or veterans, you can still add the dependents using the non-filers enter payment info. There still is time to do that. However, for Social Security and SSDI, that's going to have to wait until the 2020 tax season. They just had the cutoff of this previous Wednesday, the 22nd, to get that information in, because I believe those checks are probably in the process of going out within this next week. So there's still time to get if you have SSI or VA, to add it, but we've missed the window for Social Security. So again, that'll be reconciled at the end of the year when you do your next year's tax return. So again, that's pretty much what I have. Any questions or people need help with that, certainly call CVOEO and ask for me, and I give them whatever help they need.
All right, thank you, Michael. Really great. Again, these slides we will provide with the link. So if you want to go back and review some of these resources, I really encourage everyone to do that. So moving along, we have our final panelists. I don't see any questions coming in, and that's fine for now, but maybe after Kelly presents, if any of the other panelists want to kind of circle back on anything that you wanted to elaborate a little bit more on. I know I gave you guys some time constraints, but please feel free to do so if you want to chime in on something that another panelist brought up as well. But first, we're going to get to Kelly Stoddard-Poor, Director of Outreach at AARP. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you to the other panelists. You've provided such a wealth of information on a really complicated subject for many folks. So thank you, Christine, for organizing this. As she shared, I work for AARP. We have 127,000 members across the state, and our office is located in Burlington. And like others on the panel, I too am working from home right now. Our offices have been closed through mid-May at AARP, but we are available electronically and by phone if anybody has any questions. So my first slide that I have up, which I'll go through pretty quickly, and just because the other presenters did such a great job of talking about eligibility, how to go about filing as a non-filer, but I do want to just highlight a really excellent tool that AARP launched pretty recently, and it's the Stimulus Payment Calculator. And unlike some other calculators, our tool includes calculations for those who don't earn enough to require a tax return, and also acknowledges Social Security retirement recipients as well. So it's a really great online tool. If you can use the website provided here, or just go into Google and type in AARP calculator stimulus, and it'll be able to pop up for you. So that's just a really helpful tool that's available for anybody. So the next slide, so switching the subject slightly, Now, as the distribution of the stimulus payments are coming out, we want to make sure that money stays where it belongs. And unfortunately, there are a lot of crooks out there, and crises do not slow them down in any way. They often actually thrive in times of uncertainty like we are in right now. And already there has been more than $13 million lost to coronavirus-related schemes. And that's based on the last 10,000 fraud complaints filed with the Federal Trade Commission, and that was just of mid-April. So we know that con artists like to prey on older adults, especially, and now that the stimulus payments are rolling out, they're really a top target for a lot of folks. So important things for people to remember: the IRS will not email, call, or text you asking you to verify your personal or financial information, like your bank account number, or to send you a payment. So, but scammers will do this, all right? And the IRS will not ask you to pay a fee to issue or speed up your stimulus payment either. The only place that you should enter your bank account information online is through the secure web tools provided by irs.gov, which was also shared with by the other presenters. The IRS and its Criminal Investigation Division have seen a wave of new schemes that criminals are devising to cheat folks out of their stimulus checks, and a way to be able to gain access to their personal identifying information like their social security number or bank account information. So do not give your banking information to strangers who offer to help you put that information into the IRS system for you. So those are just some really important features there just to keep a lookout on. And the next slide. So here are some key pieces if you are mailed a stimulus check, things to look at on the check itself. The Treasury seal. This new seal will say the Bureau of Fiscal Service once the check stock showing the fiscal management services run out. So that seal will be featured on the check. The Treasury seal to the right of the image of the Statue of Liberty has a security ink that will run and turn red if moisture is applied to it. And then micro printed words are very small, and they appear as just a line to the naked eye for all of us, but when they're magnified, these words become very visible. So the micro printing cannot be duplicated by a copier, and when a check is counterfeited, it will often show up as a solid line or a series of dotted lines on the check. And the watermark as well. So all the stimulus checks are printed on watermark paper that reads U.S. Treasury, which can be seen from both the front and the back of the check when it's held up to the light. If any check does not have this watermark, it could possibly be counterfeit or a copy. The ultraviolet overprinting as well. This is a pattern usually found under the payee information and the dollar amount area on the check. And then also the checks will feature the words on the lower right side of the Statue of Liberty, economic impact payment, and then signed by the president. So just a couple of features to look at. And the next slide. So if you are feeling that you have been potentially scammed or doing any sort of, or reporting any information, we are warning our members and giving them information to reach out to us directly. And you can always call us on our toll-free number, which is featured up on the slide, 877-908-3360. Or you can also go to aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork, and you can find out the latest scams that are happening related to COVID-19. They're beyond just what's happening with the stimulus, but are other fake coronavirus testing sites that are trying to get people to get their money, and then also bogus cures that are out there as well. And it's really quite heartbreaking to see this. If you do receive a suspicious stimulus payment email that you suspect is fraudulent, you can email the IRS at phishing@irs.gov, and you can also file a complaint with the FTC as well. So It's a really crucial time to stay alert and stay informed during the crisis. And as I shared, AARP.org/coronavirus, we have a tremendous amount of information related to mental health, your physical health, but also staying safe against frauds and scams as well. So great resources for anybody to access. Thank you, Christine.
All right, thank you, Kelly. I'm really glad you covered that topic. I know that's a concern. I've heard some concerns personally regarding scams, so that's really great. Glad that you were here to cover that. Did anyone else, we have some time here. We might have a question. Sorry, one second. Okay, so this, a couple panelists might be able to answer this. I'll just throw it out to you guys because it is about dependents. I think you guys had some good information on that. For people who have dependents under 17 and miss the deadline to receive the $500 payment, when exactly can they submit to get the payment and when should they expect to receive it? Michael or Zach, did you want to comment?
Yeah, so so if this person did not file a tax return in 2018 or 2019 and they receive a Social Security benefit or a Veterans Administration benefit and they missed the deadline to provide that information to the IRS about their dependent, what they'll have to do is they'll have to file a tax return for tax year 2020, and this is next spring. They'll file a tax return claiming that same dependent, and they should get the extra $500 stimulus payment at that time as a refundable credit on their 2020 tax return. Unfortunately, the IRS has said that they are not going to issue more than one check per household. So if you've already received your $1,200 stimulus check or the IRS has already processed that, they've said, we don't have the ability to issue a second check just for the $500, which is why you'll have to wait until next year to file your 2020 taxes.
Michael, did you have anything to add, or?
No, that's exactly the way I understand it too. The only caveat would be things are changing every week here. So you can always just keep your eyes peeled on the IRS website to see if there's any changes. But yeah, that's exactly how I understand it.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk about dependents a little bit more if we have the time, because this is a big issue that we're starting to see come up over and over again. So we're getting a lot of calls at Legal Aid about dependents, and this can be people fighting over dependent children. So if you have parents who are separated or divorced and they usually alternate claiming a dependent, you know, it depends how the IRS processes the information to issue these checks. We've seen, you know, one parent will call and say, I have this child now for 2020, and just because my ex got to claim the child in 2019, he's going to get the extra $500 now. And that's exactly what's been happening. You know, so if you're alternating years claiming dependents, unfortunately, the IRS is going to choose what tax return to process a stimulus check. It could be tax year 2018. We've seen it both ways, where they used 2018 and issued the extra $500 to the parent who had the child in 2018. We've seen it where they've used 2019 tax information and issued the extra $500 to the parent who had the child in 2019. And, you know, that leaves the other parent who's actually claiming the child in 2020, you know, saying, why did my ex get the extra $500? The only recourse here right now is they'll have to file their tax return for tax year 2020 next year, and they'll claim that child. And the way the law is written is it says you should get whatever stimulus benefit you didn't receive in advance on that 2020 tax return. Now, I'm a little skeptical here because generally the IRS will only issue a credit for a Social Security number once, meaning that if they already issued $500 for a dependent Social Security number to that other parent, they're probably not going to issue it again. And there's really no good recourse that we've identified just yet, other than filing that 2020 tax return and seeing what happens. My suspicion is that the IRS will probably say, we've already issued this $500 based on the Social Security number. We're not going to issue a second one. if you've got a problem with that, you can argue with your ex. This is a state tax court issue or a family court issue, but we'll see. So we're getting calls about that right now. I don't know if you have anything to add on that, Mike, or anybody else.
No, to be honest with you, I was curious how they were going to do it. If I figured they would have to be reconciled at 220 or 2020, but like you say, are they going to allow it to both or not? I don't know. I guess that's TBD.
Right. And the law itself is written pretty vaguely, where I think we could make a good argument that they, both parents should get that extra $500, but we'll see. Yeah, pretty much. So
I would just jump in and say that this topic came up in a call we had with the IRS yesterday. And I would anticipate, you're right, that they are not going to want to issue double payments, and they're going to see it as a matter that's, really pertaining to the arrangements made through the divorce. But, I think, as Mike said before, things are changing every day. And, I think once the majority of payments go out, there'll be opportunity to take some of these up further.
Yeah. Two other quick issues that we're seeing related to dependents is we're also getting calls from some people who say, hey, I am not going to get my stimulus check because I was claimed as a dependent on my father's tax return. These can be adult children who may live with their parents or who live with a relative who's claimed them on a tax return. And they say, well, I never gave permission to be claimed as a dependent. And unfortunately, permission is not part of the equation when it comes to if you're allowably claimed as a dependent by another person or not. But there are people who, even though they may live in a household with somebody who is potentially claiming them as a dependent, if they're not providing over half of your support, that's one of the main requirements to be claimed as a dependent. So we've gotten a lot of calls from people who, they're adults. They think that they should be able to get their own $1,200 stimulus check, but they're saying this person claimed me as a dependent and I don't think they were allowed to. Unfortunately, it's kind of the same situation here where if your social security number has already been used by another person on a 2018 or 2019 tax return, if that check has already been issued or they've already received their check, then you can either try and file a tax return for tax year 2019 if you haven't already, and see how that goes. Or if you go to reconcile next year, you can make the argument at that point that you should get your own $1,200 check then. But if you've been claimed as a dependent by somebody and you think that was wrong and that's inhibiting you from getting your own stimulus check, you should give us a call because that's an issue that we can help you work on. And then the last issue with dependents here is not quite a dependent issue, but taxpayers who have spouses who filed a joint tax return on their behalf without their consent. Now, this can be potential domestic violence survivors who've since gotten out of that relationship or who are in the process of getting out of that relationship. There's a lot of people out there who were claimed or filed on a joint tax return with their spouse, and they've since separated, and the spouse who filed that return put their direct deposit information, meaning that, this person is not going to get their own stimulus check. It's going to go to the other spouse. There's no formal process to fix this right now other than dealing with it when tax year 2020 comes up. But you should call us if this is happening to you because there may be a couple other mechanisms that we can try in the meantime to maybe get you your check in advance when it's really needed. So those were kind of the couple other issues that we're seeing with people who are claimed on another's tax return.
Okay, great. Thanks. A lot of great information. I know the dependent issue is, still confusing to me as well. So I'm really glad we elaborated more on that. I think it's ever evolving and the information out there. I'm really glad you guys were able to hone in on that and share that. It's really great. If anyone else had anything to add on, we're kind of in the last 5 minutes or so. I am going to share a screen right now with some contact information. Again, I just want to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded and all of the slides that we had during the webinar will be linked to this, so you can go on to the Burlington's Resource and Recovery Center page and access this webinar again. I know it was a lot of information, so please feel free to go back and then follow up with any questions that you may have. So I'm going to share that screen, and then if any of the other panelists want to, you know, chime in with any follow-up points they wanted to make, now's the time to do so. I think we covered a lot. I don't know that there's a lot more we can probably cover in the next few minutes.
Oh, I've got a list of things. I guess one thing that maybe we haven't hit on is a lot of people are asking questions, like they go to the Get My Payment portal that the IRS has set up, and they're getting this message back saying status not available, and they want to know what that means, and they're panicking because they think, oh no, I'm not going to get my check. It can mean many different things. Maybe you're not eligible, but also maybe, you know, you haven't filed the tax return and you're required to. Maybe the IRS just hasn't gotten around to processing the information that they've been given by the Social Security Administration. So what we're telling people is that Get My Payment portal is updated once per day. So there's no need to check back more frequently, and just try and be patient while these checks are going out and the IRS is processing this. And if you're continuing to hit a roadblock there and you suspect that it's an issue with you being claimed by somebody who shouldn't, or your check going to somebody who has control over a bank account that you used or something like that, certainly call Vermont Legal Aid and we can help you with advice or a consultation or even representation on that issue.
All right, thank you for that add-on. I think we're just going to wrap things up here. I just want to take a minute to thank the panelists. We couldn't have done this without you and your expertise and your experience. It's really incredible. It's just, you know, blew me away, the willingness. You guys, you know, jumped right in on this and wanted to help out. It's really fantastic. So thank you again to all the panelists. Thank you to Mayor Weinberger for the introduction. And I think that concludes our webinar. So thank you all for being here.
Thanks.